All right, so we've got a stack of writing advice books here.
Yeah,
Looks like someone is getting serious about this novel idea,
absolutely.
which is awesome. Today's deep dive takes us right to the heart of storytelling,
Uh-huh.
crafting unforgettable characters.
You got it. And, one book you gave me, How to Write a Damn Good Novel,
Yeah.
really hammers this home.
Okay.
It really gets into the nitty-gritty of creating characters that feel real believable
Yeah.
and most importantly, compelling.
I noticed the author talks a lot about maximum capacity,
Yeah,
and I have to admit that sounds a little intimidating.
right.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's a crucial concept,
Okay.
but it doesn't have to be intimidating at all.
Okay.
Essentially, maximum capacity means that your characters, both heroes and villains,
Okay.
are always operating at their highest possible level of intelligence and resourcefulness within the world you've created.
Okay.
They don't make illogical choices just to move the plot forward.
So you're saying no more. Why did she go into the creepy basement alone moments?
Exactly. Readers can see those coming a mile away.
Right.
And it breaks the believability of the story. Maximum capacity is about
Yeah.
making sure your characters use their brains,
Okay.
making their choices and the consequences much more engaging.
That makes a lot of sense, but the book also talks about how fictional characters,
Right.
or homo fictus,
Yeah.
are more like concentrated humans.
Yeah.
How do we balance believability
Right.
with that larger-than-life quality?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Homo fictus is just a fancy way of saying that fictional characters are, by necessity, more extreme
Okay.
than us everyday folks.
Okay.
They experience emotions more intensely, their desires are more powerful, and they often face higher stakes. Think of it like this. They're living out the essence of human experience,
Okay.
but amplified for dramatic effect.
So it's less about creating superhuman characters
Correct.
and more about tapping into the core of what makes us human and turning up the volume?
Precisely. And because these characters are operating at this heightened level, every decision,
Yeah.
every internal struggle becomes much more gripping for the reader.
Okay, so we need characters who are both believable and captivating.
Yes,
The kind who can really hook a reader.
absolutely.
Now, the book also gets into the different types of characters, right?
Yes.
Like the classic flat versus rounded character distinction.
Yes, it's a fundamental concept.
Okay.
You could think of flat characters as those walk-on roles, serving a specific purpose but not requiring a ton of depth.
Okay.
Rounded characters, on the other hand,
Yeah.
are complex with a past inner conflicts and motivations that drive the story forward.
I'm guessing we want more of those rounded characters.
Absolutely.
The ones that keep you guessing.
Rounded characters are the ones that readers truly connect with.
Okay.
Their struggles feel real, their victories are more satisfying, and their flaws make them human and relatable.
And speaking of relatable, the book uses the example of this detective Boyer Mitchell,
Right.
who doesn't exactly fit the tough guy detective stereotype.
Right, he's described as young-looking, a bit nerdy.
Okay.
More of a scientific criminologist than a stereotypical hard-boiled detective.
So the author is intentionally playing against expectations here.
Exactly.
It's like, don't judge a book by its cover applied to character development.
Exactly, and by giving him those unexpected qualities, the author makes him more memorable, more human.
Okay.
He has to overcome his physical limitations by being extra clever and resourceful,
Okay.
which instantly makes him more engaging for the reader.
That's fascinating. But it's not just about one book, right?
Right.
We have this whole stack of sources that touch on the idea of character-driven storytelling.
You're right. We have The Godfather, Madame Bovary, The Old Man and the Sea, all these classics.
Wow.
And while they span different genres and time periods,
Yeah.
they all emphasize complex characters.
So whether it's a mob boss, a dissatisfied housewife, or an aging fisherman, it's the internal struggles,
Right.
the motivations of these characters that make us care about what happens next.
Precisely, the external plot becomes almost secondary
Wow.
to the internal journey of the characters.
Okay.
This concept echoes throughout literary history,
Yeah.
showing us how crucial it is to create compelling characters in any genre.
Okay. This is giving me a lot to think about
Yeah.
already. We've barely scratched the surface,
Yeah.
and I can already see how much depth goes into creating a character that can carry a story.
It is a lot to unpack, but it's exciting, right?
Yeah.
How to Write a Damn Good Novel goes even deeper,
Okay.
suggesting that we need to approach character development almost like building a real person.
Okay.
They introduce what they call the 3 dimensions of character.
Right. I saw that sociological and psychological. That sounds pretty intense.
It might sound complex,
Yeah.
but it's actually a very practical approach.
Okay.
It helps ensure your characters are more than just names on a page.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me. What does each dimension entail?
Well, the physiological dimension is the most straightforward.
Okay.
It's all about the physical traits, height, weight, eye color, posture, any distinguishing features.
Okay.
But it also includes things like physical limitations,
Uh-huh.
strengths, even quirks or habits.
So for Boyer Mitchell, it would be his slight build,
Yes.
his nerdy appearance, maybe even something like a nervous habit of pushing up his glasses.
Exactly. Those physical details give readers a clear picture,
Yeah.
but they also directly influence how he interacts with the world.
Right.
And how other characters perceive him.
That makes sense. So what about the sociological dimension? Where does that come in?
This dimension is all about the character's place in the world.
Okay.
Their upbringing, education, occupation, social class,
Yeah.
religious beliefs, political affiliations, all the external factors
Okay.
that have shaped their worldview.
So for Boyer Mitchell, it would be things like growing up as the son of a famous tough guy detective. And how that legacy impacts his own career choices and his internal struggles.
Exactly. His sociological background provides a rich source of conflict and motivation.
Right.
He's trying to forge his own path, while also carrying the weight of his family history.
Okay, so we've got the physical, the social.
Right.
What about the psychological dimension that one seems like it could really make or break a character?
It's definitely where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This dimension delves into the character's inner world. Their fears, desires, motivations, secrets, traumas.
Okay.
Basically everything going on beneath the surface that shapes their actions and reactions.
So if we stick with Boyer Mitchell, his desire to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy,
Yes.
even though he's not a tough guy, would fall under this dimension.
Absolutely. It's an internal conflict that adds depth.
Okay.
And makes him more relatable than a one-dimensional hero.
Right.
We all have those insecurities and doubts, right?
Totally. Okay. I'm starting to see how these three dimensions are like building blocks. Yes.
But instead of bricks and mortar, it's personality and motivation.
That's a great way to put it. And you can't just throw them all in a bowl and hope for the best.
Right.
It's about carefully balancing these elements, layering them together to create characters who feel authentic and complex.
Got it. So we need to consider not just what our characters look like and where they come from, but why they do the things they do.
Precisely if we connect this to the concept of homo fictus.
Okay.
These three dimensions become the tools for amplifying human experience in our characters.
Ah, I see. It's not just about making them bigger or bolder.
Right.
It's about crafting these multifaceted inner lives that resonate with readers on a deeper level.
Exactly. And speaking of creating those larger-than-life personalities, How to Write a Damn Good Novel brings up another crucial element for crafting compelling stories: conflict.
Okay.
In fact, the author calls it one of the three greatest rules of dramatic writing.
Yeah.
Conflict. Now, we all know conflict is important in storytelling.
Right.
But how does it specifically relate to creating unforgettable characters?
Well, conflict isn't just about throwing obstacles in a character's way. When it comes to character development, conflict is what forces them to reveal their true nature. It tests their resolve, exposes their strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately reveals who they really are.
That reminds me of the famous line from The Godfather: great men are not born great, they grow great through struggle.
What a perfect example.
Yeah.
And that idea is at the heart of character-driven storytelling.
Right.
It's through their struggles that characters evolve, grow, and become truly memorable.
So to really make our characters stand out, we need to put them through the ringer.
Well, it's not about gratuitous suffering.
Right.
But it's about using conflict strategically to deepen their characterization and move the story forward.
Okay, I'm with you. So going back to Boyer Mitchell, instead of being a stereotypical tough guy, he's got these physical and social limitations.
Yes.
Does that create a more compelling conflict?
Absolutely.
Because he has to constantly overcome those challenges.
You have to be extra clever and resourceful to compensate for his lack of brawn.
Right.
He's constantly battling those internal doubts and the weight of his father's legacy.
Yeah.
Which adds another layer of conflict.
So the takeaway here is that conflict isn't just about external obstacles.
Right.
It's about those internal struggles as well.
Exactly. And when you weave those inner and outer conflicts together, you create characters that feel real and multidimensional,
Right.
they jump off the page because we see them grappling with relatable challenges. And, the book doesn't just talk about the importance of conflict in a general sense.
Okay.
It goes deep, outlining different patterns of dramatic conflict.
Oh, right. I remember seeing that something about static conflict, jumping conflict, and slowly rising conflict. That seemed like something that could really impact how a story feels.
Absolutely. These patterns are all about pacing.
Okay.
And how the level of tension unfolds throughout the story.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the rundown. What are the differences between these patterns?
Let's start with static conflict. Imagine a pot of water simmering on a stove.
Okay.
It's consistently hot, but it never quite reaches a full boil.
Oh, okay.
That's static conflict. The intensity remains relatively constant throughout the story.
Got it.
Think of a couple who constantly bickers but never actually breaks up.
Okay, so it's like a constant underlying tension.
Right.
But not necessarily those big explosive moments.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with jumping conflict. This is more like a roller coaster.
Okay.
With sudden drops and turns, the level of intensity jumps up and down.
Okay.
Keeping the reader on the edge of their seat.
So something like a spy thriller.
Yes.
Where the protagonist is constantly being thrown into new, dangerous situations.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a brief lull, then bam, back to the action.
Precisely. Now, slowly rising conflict, as the name suggests, is more gradual.
Okay.
Think of that pot of water slowly coming to a boil.
Yeah.
The tension builds, gradually increasing the stakes as the story progresses.
So maybe a psychological thriller?
Exactly.
Where a character slowly descends into madness?
Exactly. It's a slow burn that could be incredibly effective when done well.
Okay.
The key is to choose the pattern that best suits the story you're trying to tell.
It's fascinating how much thought goes into something like pacing conflict.
Right.
You're making me look at my favorite books in a whole new light.
It's all about those subtle choices that authors make to keep you engaged. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
I want to circle back to this idea of character maximum capacity.
Okay.
Because it's so crucial for creating believable characters.
Right. We touched on that earlier. It's about making sure our characters are always making the smartest,
Yes.
most resourceful choices they can within the context of the story.
Exactly. And that means no dumb decisions just to move the plot along.
Right.
Readers can spot those a mile away. Maximum capacity is about respecting their intelligence.
Okay.
And creating characters who feel like real people.
Yeah.
Even if they're living in extraordinary circumstances.
It makes sense. So how do we ensure our characters are truly operating at that level?
It starts with truly knowing your characters.
Okay.
What are their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and motivations? How would those factors influence their decisions in any given situation?
Okay.
Once you have that solid foundation, you can start to map out their actions and reactions in a way that feels both believable and compelling.
Okay, so it's about creating characters who are consistent.
Yes.
Who make choices that align with their personality and their goals.
Precisely. And, how to write a damn good novel suggests a really helpful tool for checking if you're on the right track.
Okay.
They call it the would he really test.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's incredibly simple but effective.
Okay.
Every time your character makes a decision, big or small,
Yeah.
you ask yourself, would he really do that?
Right.
You put yourself in their shoes, considering their knowledge, their fears, their motivations, and see if their action rings true.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
I can see how that could help prevent those idiot plot moments.
Exactly.
Where characters make illogical choices just to advance the story.
And it forces you to really think through the consequences of their actions.
Right.
Which can lead to a more satisfying and believable story.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From Homo fictus to the 3 dimensions of character.
Right.
And this, would he really... My head is spinning a little.
It is a lot.
It's incredible how much goes into crafting compelling characters.
There's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly rewarding when you start to see those characters come to life on the page.
Well, I think our listener could probably use a moment to process all this amazing information.
Sounds like a good plan. We've barely scratched the surface of character creation.
All right.
But I'm excited to dive deeper when we return for part 2 of this deep dive.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, to our listener, take a moment to think about your favorite characters from books and movies. Do they feel real? Do their choices make sense?
Yeah.
Do they operate at their maximum capacity? Lots to ponder until we return for part 2.
Absolutely.
See you then.
See you then. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how crucial it is to ensure your characters are always making smart, believable choices. That maximum capacity idea really resonated with me.
Yeah, it's a game changer. But avoiding those idiot plot moments brings up another challenge.
Yeah.
How do we create characters who are unique and memorable, not just recycled stereotypes?
That's a fantastic point. Falling into stereotypes is a real trap for writers.
Right.
Especially when you're working within familiar genres like crime fiction or romance.
Yeah.
We've all seen those cardboard cutouts a million times.
Exactly. The tough-talking detective with a hidden soft spot, the damsel in distress.
Right.
The villain who's evil just for the sake of being evil. It's also predictable.
And predictable makes for boring characters.
Right.
So how do we avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah.
It starts with being aware of the common tropes in your genre and then actively challenging them. Give your characters unexpected qualities, motivations, and backstories that break the mold.
So, for instance, with Boyer Mitchell, the author subverts the typical hard-boiled detective trope.
Right.
By making him more intellectual and nerdy.
Precisely. Yeah. And that subversion of expectations makes him so much more interesting.
Yeah.
He's not just a rehash of every detective we've seen before.
Okay, so it's about finding those surprising contradictions, those unexpected layers that make a character feel like a real person.
Exactly. Imagine that tough-talking detective we talked about.
Uh-huh.
Instead of just giving him a heart of gold, maybe he's secretly a gourmet cook or has a passion for collecting antique dolls.
Okay.
Those little details can make a world of difference.
I love that it's like the tougher the exterior, the more surprising and delightful the hidden passion.
Exactly.
And I think this ties into another concept we touched on earlier, making characters relatable.
Absolutely. We want readers to connect with our characters on an emotional level, to feel invested in their journey. And one of the best ways to do that is to give them inner conflicts.
Okay, remind me, what does that look like in practice?
Inner conflict is the struggle within a character's own heart and mind.
Okay.
It's the battle between their desires, their fears, their values. Think of it like this. Everyone has those moments where they're torn between what they want to do and what they should do. Characters are no different.
So for Boyer Mitchell, maybe he's struggling with his desire to be a great detective like his father,
Right.
but also battling the fear that he doesn't have what it takes.
Exactly. And that internal struggle makes him so much more relatable than if he was just a confident, swaggering hero.
Right.
We've all been there wrestling with our own insecurities and doubts.
It's that vulnerability that makes us root for them, right? We want to see them overcome those challenges, even if we make different choices in our own lives.
Precisely. That's the power of inner conflict.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of empathy.
Yeah.
And makes us feel invested in the character's journey.
This makes me think of that quote by Anton Chekhov. Man will become better when you show him what he is like. By giving characters inner conflicts, we're showing readers a reflection of themselves.
Yes.
Those messy, complicated parts of being human.
That's such a great point. Inner conflict allows us to see ourselves in these characters, to connect with their struggles, even if their lives are vastly different from our own.
Right.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together.
You know, this conversation is really highlighting how much goes into creating characters that feel real and relatable.
It is.
It's not just about giving them a cool name and a tragic backstory. There's a lot more at play.
You're absolutely right. Another crucial element is making sure your characters are active rather than passive.
Okay, I've heard that advice before.
Right.
But I'm not sure I fully grasp it. What's the difference between an active and a passive character?
Think of it like this. Active characters drive the story forward. They make choices. They take risks. They fight for what they want. Passive characters, on the other hand, are more reactive.
Right.
They let things happen to them rather than shaping their own destiny.
So Boyer Mitchell, instead of whining about not being as tough as his father, uses his intellect and resourcefulness to find his own way of succeeding.
Exactly. He's not sitting around waiting to be rescued or for things to magically fall into place.
Right.
He's actively pursuing his goals even when it's hard.
Got it. And I imagine passive characters, even if they're likable, tend to be less engaging because they don't really take charge of their own story.
That's exactly it. Yeah. They might be sympathetic, but we don't necessarily feel compelled to root for them because they're not fighting for something.
All right, so inner conflict, making them active. What else is crucial for creating characters that we genuinely care about?
This might sound obvious, but it's worth emphasizing your characters need depth.
I'm sensing a theme here, a lot of layers.
Yes, depth is what makes them feel real, multifaceted, and ultimately human.
Okay.
They have a past, they have secrets, they have dreams and aspirations. They're not just one-dimensional cutouts who exist to serve the plot.
It's about seeing the whole person, Right? Yeah. The good, the bad, the messy contradictions that make us who we are.
Precisely. To create that depth, you have to ask yourself the tough questions about your characters.
Okay.
Why do they do the things they do? What motivates them? What are they afraid of? What do they truly want out of life?
So we're not just thinking about what they look like or where they come from, but really digging into their psyche, uncovering the why behind their actions.
Exactly. And the more you understand your characters on that deeper level, the more they'll come alive on the page.
This reminds me of something Maya Angelou said. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
That's a powerful quote. And it gets to the heart of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When you create characters with depth, they evoke emotions in the reader. They make us feel something.
Right.
And that's what makes them unforgettable.
Yeah. It's not just about telling a good story. It's about creating an emotional experience for the reader.
Yeah.
And that all starts with compelling characters.
Absolutely. And there's another key element we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
That's essential for making those characters feel real motivation.
Yes, motivation. The why behind what it seems like we keep coming back to this idea of digging deeper,
right?
Understanding the forces that drive our characters.
It's true. And motivation is at the heart of it all.
Right.
It's the engine that drives every character's actions.
Yeah.
If we don't understand why they're doing something, their choices won't feel believable.
So, for example, Boyer Mitchell's motivations might be to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy, or to seek justice, or maybe even just to prove to himself that he can be a successful detective despite his limitations.
Exactly. And those underlying motivations will shape his choices, his actions, and his overall journey throughout the story.
Yeah.
So it makes him tick.
It all comes back to believability, doesn't it?
It does.
If the motivations aren't there, the characters feel hollow.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But strong motivations don't just make a character believable.
Right.
They also make them more engaging because we become invested in their journey. We want to see if they succeed or if they fail, depending on what they're striving for.
So it's about giving our characters a purpose, a driving force that propels them through the story.
Exactly. Those goals, desires, and motivations are what give them that spark of life.
You know, this is starting to feel like a masterclass in character creation.
It is.
But I have to imagine that even with all these tools and insights, there's still no one-size-fits-all approach.
That's the beauty of it. The best way to learn is to read widely.
Okay.
To study the characters in your favorite books and movies.
Yeah.
And to experiment with your own writing. See what works, what doesn't, and find your own voice.
So it's about learning from the masters and then finding your own unique style.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more intuitive all these principles will become.
I'm definitely feeling inspired. We've covered so much character types, inner conflict, avoiding stereotypes, making them active.
Yes.
Giving them depth and now motivation. Is there anything else we need to know about crafting these compelling characters?
There is one more crucial element I'd like to touch on, the importance of character growth.
Right. Characters should evolve over the course of the story, right?
Yes.
They shouldn't be static. It's like, what did they learn? How did this experience change them?
Exactly. Character growth is what makes a story truly satisfying.
Okay.
It's about seeing our characters change, learn, and overcome challenges. They might start out flawed or broken, but by the end, they've transformed in some way.
It's like they go on an internal journey that mirrors the external plot, right? They're not just reacting to events. They're actively changing and growing because of them.
That's a great way to put it. And that growth can be positive or negative.
Okay.
A character might become more heroic, selfless, and understanding.
Yeah.
Or they could take a darker path, becoming more villainous or corrupt.
So it's not always about a happy ending.
Right.
It's about seeing how the character's experiences shape them, for better or worse.
Exactly. The key is to make sure that growth feels authentic, believable, and connected to their motivations.
So, for instance, Boyer Mitchell might start out insecure and unsure of himself, but through his experiences as a detective, maybe he gains confidence and becomes more assertive while still holding on to his unique approach.
Precisely, his growth wouldn't be random.
Right.
It would be a direct result of the challenges he's faced, the choices he's made, and the people he's interacted with.
Okay, I'm seeing how character growth can really take a story to the next level.
It does.
It's not just about what happens, but about who these characters become along the way.
Absolutely. It's about showing that they're not static beings.
Right.
They're constantly evolving and changing, which makes them all the more fascinating.
You know, we've really gone deep on this idea of crafting compelling characters. From those foundational elements like the 3 dimensions to those more subtle aspects like inner conflict and motivation, it's incredible how much detail goes into creating a character that can carry a story.
It is a lot to take in. To summarize, crafting compelling characters is about creating believable and relatable individuals.
Oh, yeah.
Giving them internal conflicts and strong motivations, avoiding stereotypes, ensuring they have depth, making them active participants in their own story, and showing how they grow and evolve along the way.
Wow, you've given us so much to think about. It's like you've handed us a toolkit for creating truly unforgettable characters.
And remember, all of this comes from just one book.
Right.
We still have those classic novels you provided, The Godfather, Madame Bovary, The Old Man and the Sea.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And while they might not explicitly lay out the same rules, they all demonstrate through example the power of character-driven storytelling.
That's right. We've talked a lot about theory and those nitty-gritty details. But now I'm excited to dive into those classic examples and see how these principles play out in practice.
Me too. So let's start with The Godfather.
Okay.
What can this epic tale of family loyalty and betrayal teach us about crafting compelling characters?
Okay, so we've got the Corleones, a family deeply enmeshed in organized crime.
Right.
Not exactly the most relatable premise on the surface, right?
Yeah.
So how did Mario Puzo create characters that resonate with readers despite their morally complex world?
That's a great question. And I think the answer lies in the complexity of the characters themselves.
Okay.
They're not simply good or bad. They're a mix of both. They're driven by love, loyalty, ambition, and revenge.
Right.
And those conflicting motivations make them incredibly human.
We can see those internal struggles, those moments where they're torn between what they want and what they feel they have to do.
Exactly. Think of Michael Corleone, the reluctant heir to the family business.
Right.
We can understand why he makes the choices he does, even if we don't condone them. He's a deeply conflicted character.
Yeah.
And that conflict is what makes him so fascinating.
And The Godfather also shows us how a character's past can powerfully shape their present, right?
Absolutely. Vito Corleone's experiences as a young immigrant fleeing violence in Sicily directly influence his decisions as the head of a powerful mafia family.
Yeah.
His past traumas and the choices he made to survive shape his worldview, his values, and ultimately his destiny.
So it's not just about giving a character a backstory. It's about understanding how those past experiences continue to ripple through their present lives, influencing their motivations and shaping their actions.
Precisely. And Puzo does a masterful job of weaving those past events into the present narrative, giving us a deeper understanding of why these characters are the way they are.
Okay, so The Godfather gives us a masterclass in complex motivations and the enduring influence of the past. What about Madame Bovary? What can we learn from this tale of a restless housewife who seeks fulfillment outside the confines of her marriage?
Well, I think Emma Bovary embodies the danger of unfulfilled desires.
Okay.
And the clash between individual yearnings and societal expectations.
Her story feels incredibly relevant, even though it was written centuries ago.
I agree.
There's still this pressure, especially on women, to conform to certain roles and expectations.
Exactly. And Emma is this incredibly passionate romantic woman, trapped in a world that doesn't really allow her to be her full self. She's constantly seeking happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
But her choices ultimately lead to her downfall.
It's a cautionary tale, but also a deeply empathetic one. We see her struggle, her longing for something more.
Yes.
And that makes her incredibly human, even when she makes choices we might not agree with.
Absolutely. Flaubert, the author, doesn't shy away from portraying her flaws, her impulsiveness, her vanity.
Right.
But he also allows us to see her pain, her desperation to break free from the limitations of her life.
It's that contrast, that internal conflict that makes her such a compelling character. We might not always like her, but we understand her.
Exactly, and that's what makes her story so tragic.
Yeah.
She's a victim of her own desires, but also a victim of the societal pressures that limit her choices.
Okay, so we have The Godfather exploring the dark underbelly of ambition and loyalty.
Right.
And Madame Bovary giving us a glimpse into the complexities of desire and societal expectations. What about The Old Man and the Sea?
Okay.
What insights can we glean from this seemingly simple tale of an aging fisherman battling a giant marlin?
The Old Man and the Sea is a powerful story about resilience, perseverance, and the indomitable human spirit.
Okay.
Santiago, the protagonist, faces incredible challenges. Physical exhaustion, hunger, the sheer might of the marlin.
Wow.
Yet he never gives up.
He's the embodiment of that never give up attitude, right? Even when the odds are completely stacked against him, he keeps fighting.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical strength.
Right.
It's about his mental and emotional fortitude.
Right.
He digs deep, relying on his experience, his skill, and his sheer willpower to overcome those challenges.
It's a reminder that strength can be found in unexpected places.
Yes.
Especially when we're pushed to our limits.
Precisely. And I think that's a valuable lesson for any writer. Yeah. When you're crafting your characters, give them that fighting spirit, that inner strength that allows them to persevere even when all seems lost.
Okay, so we've got the Godfather teaching us about complexity, Madame Bovary exploring societal pressures, and the Old Man in the Sea showcasing the power of resilience. These are all such different stories, yet they all highlight the power of compelling characters.
Absolutely. And while those books might not offer explicit advice on character creation, like how to write a damn good novel, they're incredible examples of how to bring those principles to life.
It's like they're showing us, not just telling us what makes a character unforgettable.
Exactly. And there's so much we can learn from studying these masters of storytelling.
Right.
I'm curious what stands out to you from these examples.
You know what strikes me is that even though these characters are fictional, they feel so real. They have flaws, they make mistakes, they struggle.
Yes.
And it's those imperfections that make us connect with them, empathize with them, and ultimately care about what happens to them.
That's such a great observation. It's a reminder that perfection isn't the goal.
Right.
It's those flaws, those contradictions, those moments of vulnerability that make our characters come alive.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from character dimensions and inner conflict to the nuances of motivation and the importance of growth.
Yes.
And we've seen how those principles are beautifully embodied in these classic works of literature.
It's been quite a journey, but before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more element that can elevate your characters to unforgettable, the use of symbolism.
Oh, right. Symbolism, using objects, actions, or even names to represent deeper ideas or themes. It's one of those writing techniques that can be incredibly powerful when done well, but also really cheesy if it's too heavy-handed.
You hit the nail on the head when used skillfully. Symbolism can add layers of meaning to your characters, giving readers a deeper understanding of their inner lives.
So, for instance, a character who is constantly wearing a mask might symbolize their fear of vulnerability, or their desire to hide their true self from the world.
Precisely. That seemingly simple object becomes a powerful representation of their internal struggle.
It's like giving a visual cue to their emotional state, right? We can see those inner conflicts playing out through the symbols they carry with them.
Exactly. It's about using those symbolic elements to hint at the deeper meaning behind their actions and motivations.
I mean, How to Write a Damn Good Novel talks about using what they call life symbols.
Yes.
What are those exactly?
Life symbols are objects or actions that hold specific significance for a character, often representing their goals, values, or fears. For example, imagine a character who dreams of escaping their small town and making a new life for themselves.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they have a recurring image of a train ticket or an open road.
So it's not just a random object, it's something that's deeply tied to their desires and their internal world.
Exactly. That symbol becomes a tangible representation of their deepest longing.
Yeah.
A visual reminder of what they're striving for.
I can see how that could add a layer of depth and meaning.
It does.
Especially if it's woven subtly throughout the story.
And that's the key subtlety. The book cautions against being too heavy-handed with symbolism.
Right.
It should enhance the story, not overpower it. It should feel organic and natural, not forced or cliche.
So no randomly throwing in a white dove every time a character experiences a moment of peace?
Exactly. That kind of cliche can feel contrived and pull the reader out of the story.
Okay, so it's about using symbolism thoughtfully, strategically, and with a light touch.
Exactly. And when done well, it can create a powerful resonance that will stay with the reader long after they finish the book.
It's amazing how all these elements we've been talking about, from character dimensions to symbolism, work together to create these multifaceted, believable characters. It's like painting a portrait with words, using all these different techniques to bring them to life.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's important to remember that creating compelling characters is a journey.
Yeah.
It's about exploration, experimentation, and constant learning.
It's not about achieving perfection,
right,
but about striving to create something real, something that resonates with readers.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to pause. For now, let our listener absorb all these ideas and insights. We've covered so much ground already.
Yeah, this has been a lot.
And I'm excited to continue this conversation when we return for the final part of our deep dive.
Me too. So, to our listener, take some time to reflect on what we've discussed. What resonated with you? What surprised you? What new insights did you gain? We'll pick up right where we left off when we return.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we've been on quite a journey exploring these intricacies of character creation.
Yeah, it has been.
We talked about everything from those foundational elements like character dimensions and motivations to those more nuanced techniques like symbolism. It's been a whirlwind of information.
It has. But hopefully a whirlwind that's left you feeling inspired and equipped to tackle the challenge of crafting unforgettable characters.
You know what's really striking me is how much emphasis how to write a damn good novel places on creating characters who operate at their maximum capacity.
Yeah.
It seems like that concept is woven through every aspect of character development.
You're absolutely right. And it makes sense, doesn't it, when characters are consistently making smart, believable choices.
Yeah.
It elevates the entire story.
Right.
We become more invested in their journey because their actions feel authentic, even when they make mistakes or face setbacks.
It's like we're saying we respect you, dear reader, and we're going to give you characters who are worthy of your attention.
Exactly. And it's not just about making characters intelligent or resourceful.
Right.
It's about understanding their individual capabilities and limitations, and then crafting their actions accordingly.
So, for instance, Boyer Mitchell, our nerdy detective, might not be the toughest guy on the block. But he uses his intellect and his scientific knowledge to solve crimes in a way that a stereotypical action hero never could.
Precisely. And that's what makes him so compelling. He's operating at his maximum capacity within the world of the story. And that makes his victories feel earned and his failures feel heartbreaking.
You know, all this talk about believability and avoiding stereotypes makes me think about those classic novels.
Yeah.
We discussed earlier The Godfather, Madame Bovary, The Old Man and the Sea. These are all stories with characters who feel so real, so deeply human, even when their lives are far removed from our own.
It's a testament to the skill of those authors. They understood the power of creating characters who make choices that resonate with readers on a fundamental level.
I'm wondering if we could revisit those books.
Yeah.
But this time through the lens of character maximum capacity.
Sure.
For instance, Michael Corleone in The Godfather, he makes some ruthless decisions.
Right.
But they always feel like calculated moves within the context of his world.
That's a great observation. Michael is a perfect example of a character operating in maximum capacity. He's intelligent, strategic, and utterly ruthless.
Yeah.
But he's also driven by a deep sense of loyalty to his family and a desire to protect them at all costs.
Okay.
His choices might be morally questionable.
Right.
But they always feel consistent with his character and his goals.
It's like we understand the why behind his actions, even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. And that understanding is crucial for creating compelling characters.
Yeah.
Even when they're villains or anti-heroes.
What about Emma Bovary? She's driven by this insatiable desire for love and fulfillment.
But her choices ultimately lead to her downfall. Does that align with the idea of maximum capacity?
That's a fascinating question. On the surface, it might seem like Emma's impulsive and self-destructive actions contradict the idea of operating at maximum capacity, but I think there's another layer to consider.
Okay.
Emma is trapped in a society that stifles her desires and limits her choices.
Yeah.
Her rebellion, while ultimately tragic, can be seen as her attempt to break free from those constraints and live a life that feels authentic to her.
So it's less about making smart choices in a conventional sense, and more about making choices that align with her deepest needs and desires.
Exactly.
Even if those choices are ultimately self-destructive.
Exactly. Within the context of her world, her limited options, and her desperate longing for something more, her choices make sense.
Right.
They're driven by a powerful internal force, even if they ultimately lead her down a dangerous path.
Okay, I'm seeing how this concept of maximum capacity is more nuanced than I initially thought.
It's not just about making characters brilliant strategists or flawless decision makers.
Right.
It's about understanding their motivations, their limitations, and the context of their world, and then crafting their actions accordingly.
You've got it. And when you embrace that complexity, you create characters who feel real, relatable, and ultimately unforgettable.
This has been such an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've unpacked so many layers of character creation, from those foundational elements to the subtle nuances that make a character truly sing.
And I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
The key is to experiment, to learn from the masters, and to find the techniques that resonate with you and your unique voice.
So to our listener, as you embark on your own writing journey, remember that creating compelling characters is a process.
Yes.
A journey of exploration and discovery.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes, to try new things, and to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Your characters are waiting to be brought to life, and we can't wait to see what you create.
Until next time on the Deep Dive Happy Writing.